Hello everybody and welcome to another amazing video of DIY investing. Bitcoin is breaking out, flipping above $65,000 resistance, and is making the early signal that we're about to be making our first major run into price discovery. Every time Bitcoin makes a new all-time high, enters price discovery for the first time its cycle, we see the maximum amount of profit generated inside of our altcoin positions. Today I'm going to be sharing with you guys prior cycles, we're going to be comparing them to what we're seeing today, and I'm going to be sharing with you guys exactly what I'm anticipating for Bitcoin throughout the rest of 2025. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you find any value in this video, please do me a favor, hit that like and subscribe button. And without further ado, let's jump right into this amazing video today. Alrighty guys, here we are to start off today's video, and I'm really excited to be mapping out Bitcoin because it's more or less perfectly followed along to what we were talking about. And now that we're flipping our major resistance levels, I do believe that we are moments away from finally making a new all-time high and entering price discovery for the first time this cycle. Yes, I'm not counting what these little tiny peaks above our prior high was. I'm looking at this as us ultimately rejecting below resistance. We've been inside of this bull flag formation for the last 6 months, consolidating right under those prior all-time highs, and I made it very clear that I believed that this was ultimately just going to be our final consolidation before we saw that massive breakout into price discovery. Now, as it stands, Bitcoin has made a massive move back up to the range highs. We retested our mid-range of our cycle. We've already got a buyback, and Bitcoin is currently closing back above resistance, looking like it's moments away from making that push into 100K. My target has been 100K for a while. I fully anticipate that that's going to be the next area that Bitcoin rallies upwards towards, and that's where, we could see some type of short-term correction. One of the most important things that I want you guys to be aware of are what happens when Bitcoin makes a new all-time high and why it's so important to be positioned beforehand, because this is where the max amount of our profit is actually generated. We look at Bitcoin, we've been in this massive accumulation for the last 6 months, maybe even more than that depending on where you're looking, and as we're getting ready for that big breakout, I do believe that it's going to happen very quickly. A lot of people are going to entirely just miss out on this run, but with that being said, what I'm looking at is one of the biggest opportunities that we're going to see, because it's always in that first breakout for a new all-time high for Bitcoin that the maximum amount of our profit is generated inside of our altcoin positions. We can come back to some of these prior cycles and take a look at how they've accumulated all the way back since 2017, because this is something that I've noticed going all the way back into my first cycle. Stellar Lumens was one I made a lot of money off of. And if you guys notice, it gets added to exchanges and it just pretty much trends sideways and down. Doesn't do anything. However, the second that Bitcoin made a new all-time high in 2017, Stellar Lumens went up about 100x in this first breakout. And then when Bitcoin actually pulled back and made its first major sell-off, when Bitcoin rallied from 1,000 to 3,000 and then pulled back, it was in that pullback that we saw kind of this midway shakeout. And this is why I say, when we're looking at the Bitcoin chart, I believe we're going to make a ton of money off of this big breakout and the first breakout into new all-time highs. However, as a reference point, when we're looking at the prior cycles, all of these altcoins make these big breakouts, but then once Bitcoin makes that first major correction into new all-time highs, altcoins get absolutely demolished. And so we have to be aware that there's going to be a period where there's going to be this midway shakeout that takes place, and I don't know for sure where that's going to be. Is that going to be taking place at 100K? Maybe Bitcoin rallies to 100K. We see that first major pullback back down. And then at the end of that, we do another one of these. I'm not going to be the least bit surprised to see these little pullbacks 20 to 30, 40% on the entire way up of our trend. Because during these periods, a lot of altcoins that are going to be outperforming are going to have to kind of go back down to reality, correct for a little bit before we can get that next push. The best performing altcoins will continue to rally with Bitcoin in the same ways that even Stellar Lumens did in the last cycle. After we went through that massive correction, Bitcoin rallied from basically 3,000 to 20,000 all in one go for its blow off top. And Stellar Lumens also went for its final blow off top, and it actually outperformed Bitcoin. So this is an example that we're going to see in a lot of these altcoins, where for a long time, these altcoins are going to go down and sideways. The second Bitcoin makes that new all-time high, many of these are going to make some of their biggest type of moves all in one go. And that's why we need to be prepared, because this is where we make all of that money. Now, I think the best way is to actually take profits on some of these altcoins when they pump. Considering even if we're looking at Solana from our last cycle, it was in a little bit of a different sort of scenario as what Stellar Lumens was, where this thing had already made a higher high and a correction. Bitcoin made its new all-time high right here. So Solana was actually at the very bottom of its correction before we started that breakout. Bitcoin was at $42,000 right here. So Bitcoin rallied from 20,000 to 40,000, made a big move into new all-time highs. And Solana, the best performing altcoin, was still below its prior all-time highs. It was once Bitcoin actually got back above 42,000 and started rallying upwards of 50 and 60,000 that we really started to see Solana distance itself from the rest of the market. And then after the 65K correction for Bitcoin, Bitcoin rallied for its new all-time high at 69,000, and Solana ended up doing the same thing. So we're going to expect to see similar type of events. Obviously, it can differ. We can look even into what Ethereum looked like in its first cycle in 2017, and it pretty much did the same thing Solana did, where you have that first impulse correction, Bitcoin made a new all-time high right here. Ethereum started breaking out, rallied all the way up to $450. Bitcoin pulled back. We had that big midway correction. That's the same place where Stellar Lumens dropped really far. And then Bitcoin went from 3K to 20K, and all of the altcoins finished their blow off top. So all of them are going to follow a similar event, right? The cycle can, in and of itself look a little different. We look at Bitcoin's last cycle, and we can see that we saw a lot of peak euphoria at 65K. And even though it did make another new all-time high, a lot of that peak euphoria took place just on that first breakout into new all-time highs. So when we're looking at Bitcoin in this cycle, basically getting ready for something similar, I'm not saying that it's going to perfectly follow what our last cycle did. I'm not saying it's going to perfectly follow what 2017 did. This is its own new cycle, and it's going to do kind of its own thing. However, when we do take the time to just look at the prior cycles, we know that once Bitcoin makes that new all-time high, whichever altcoins are going to outperform are just going to make these instant sort of teleportations into new all-time highs. Stellar did it. Solana did it, Ethereum did it, and there's so many other altcoins out there that did the same thing. We can look at a number of different assets in the market. The most important thing to remember here is after we get that mania and we have that short-term correction, many of those altcoins that went up, insane gains on that first breakout, they're going to also have big shakeouts. And so you kind of have to be prepared to either hold through that correction, anticipating that we're still going to have one more big move after, or you have to more or less be willing to take profits when we're rallying upwards of 100K, maybe we even go higher than that. And then you have to be willing to kind of compound those gains back into the dip. Those are the two scenarios that I see fit. And for me, I'm going to definitely be looking to compound because I've seen the way these cycles play out. I've seen how Bitcoin develops over the course of an entire bull run. And with us now getting to the fun part of the cycle, I really am anticipating something along the lines of this to play out. And so, however all of that takes shape, we don't for sure know. But I do believe this is going to be kind of a good blueprint that we can follow for how we can actually make some profit on the rest of the cycle. Now, what I also want to talk about here is going to a log scale and actually just looking at our 4-year cycles. Now, when you're analyzing 4-year cycles, it's actually super easy to follow along with. When you're analyzing, you're going from peak low of every cycle, and the distance in between should equal exactly 4 years. 4 years is 1,450 days. From peak low of 2015 to peak low of 2018 was 1,428. So only 28 days off from being exactly 1 year. Looking at the secondary cycle we went through, it did the exact same thing. From peak low to peak low was the exact same amount of time as the cycle prior to that. So what we end up seeing are cycles that are 3 years up, 1,064, and then they are 1 year down, 364. So exactly 3 years up, 1 year down, and then the distance from cycle low to cycle low is 4 years. Looking at this current cycle, we're from the all-time high of that last cycle to where we're at today, we're currently 1,071 days. So if we're looking at, the same time frames from our last bull market, from the all-time high to the point of us making a new all-time high was 1,099 days. So we're literally 18 days away, just a couple weeks away from being the exact same amount of time as our last cycle. The longest cycle that we ever had from all-time highs to the point of making new ones was basically the 2017 cycle at like 1,240 days. So when we're looking at this one, we're at a quicker pace than 2017, but we're at the exact same pace as what we were in the last cycle. So when I'm looking at this 4-year cycle, I don't think that it's going to distance itself from this trend. I believe it's going to continue to follow the same trend that we've been on for the last 10 years, which remember, if we're looking at this, from peak low of the cycle to where we end up peaking, 1,064 days. The same thing was in 2017. From peak low of the bear market to where we peaked at the cycle top, 1,064 days. So we know that we've been following the exact same sort of events every single one of our bull markets. So if we're going to end up following something again, which it's looking like we already are up to this point, from peak low going 1,064 days, you're basically looking at October of 2025 is where our projected take profit is going to be. So, maybe it's October, maybe it's November or December. We don't know. If we're looking at the last cycle tops, this one was in November. If we're looking at 2017, this would have been in December. If we're looking all the way back over here in 2013, this would have been November as well. So we're pretty much looking at November, December for all of our cycle tops. I don't think it's a bad idea to lock up profits in October, considering that's going to be right on par with all of the prior cycles. The goal is never to sell the exact top. I know that we like to get it in our head that we're always going to buy the bottom, sell the top, realize 1,000x gains, and retire off into the sunset. It doesn't really happen like that. And so the best thing that we can do is understand where the projected cycle top is going to be and look to just get out close to that time. We're going to have to leave profit on the table. We always do. You have to get okay with just being able to watch that process happen over and over. You make 10x off something, you sell it, you watch it go up another 10x, and you're like, oh man, look how much money I would have had I held. That's just the way it goes. We can't always be focusing in on the what ifs. We have to just understand that we're here to make profit, and when we make that profit, we have to pat ourselves on the back and move on to the next trade. And with this cycle, we basically have all of 2025, because if you're looking at the last one, remember at 1,099 days, we were right here at the prior all-time highs, just about to go into new all-time highs. If we're looking at where we're at today, we're at the exact same amount of time. We've just been in this 6-month consolidation at these all-time high levels, awaiting that big breakout. And so I do anticipate we're going to follow a lot of the same type of events where this is going to rally throughout the rest of 2025. Maybe we peak all the way up here. It's hard to say exactly which price, but maybe we peak all the way up here at like 250K per Bitcoin. And then we start that next bear market back down. This is more or less the way that I think this cycle is going to play out. I don't know exactly how 2025 is going to look in price, but I do believe that we're going to make this rally upwards of 250,000 per Bitcoin before that bear market sets in. We're looking at the end of 2025 as being our take profit. So whether that's, September, October, November, I don't think it really matters, as long as you're not late to the whole party. As long as we're getting out at that cycle top, even if it drops a little bit before, we saw that with Bitcoin, you still were in a good position to get out of Bitcoin before we went into the rest of this. So I do think that even if you don't sell the exact top, we're still going to be getting out with such good profit that it really doesn't matter. So when I'm zooming out and I'm looking at all the charts, I'm seeing pretty much the same events that have played out in all of our cycles. When I'm looking at altcoins from years past, they look a lot like the altcoins that we're seeing today. A good example of this is C-Chain. The two examples I've been using lately have been SUI and C-Chain, which both of these pretty much look the same. They looked exactly like Solana did in its last cycle before we went parabolic. And I've been talking a lot about SUI, and it's already made a new all-time high, and I've been talking a lot about C, and it's about to be doing the same exact thing. Both of these setups look identical to what Solana did, look identical to what Ethereum did right before Bitcoin went into its new all-time high. And when we're looking at all of these setups, when Bitcoin made a new all-time high, this was the type of price action that followed. So looking at these altcoins, SUI and C are right there. Looking at Solana, same thing. SUI and C are right here. And if we're looking at all of these setups, they look identical. And so I got a lot of confidence that during this next breakout, we're going to make a lot of money. Bitcoin's going to follow along with the same analysis that we've been sticking to since all the way back in the last cycle. We're still maintaining the same trend of the 4-year cycle. Altcoins are setting up in the same ways that many of the top performing ones did as well. And I'm just excited to be able to trade this with you guys. So if you did find value in this video, please do me a favor. Hit that like and subscribe button. If you guys want to see anything I'm actually doing with my portfolio over this cycle, where we're buying, selling, trading, we've posted a number of signals into both of these ecosystems that are already up substantially. So if you guys want to be able to follow along with where I'm investing my money and being early to these chains before they blow up, we're about to make way more money than ever before during this next breakout. And this is really where you want to be a part of my group. So if you do want to join, links are in the description to go ahead and sign up on my website. With that being said, I love you guys. I'll catch you in the next one. As always, peace out.